In this episode, we're going to make public key cryptography feel like a set of practical building blocks for trust, not a confusing maze of math terms. Beginners often hear that public key systems are slower than symmetric encryption and then assume they are less important, but that misses the real role they play. Public key cryptography solves problems that symmetric encryption cannot solve neatly, especially around identity, secure exchange when parties have never met, and workflows where many people need to verify something without sharing secrets. Leaders in security need to understand these concepts because they sit underneath modern authentication, secure communications, and digital trust across organizations. If you can explain how public key cryptography enables identity and safe exchange, you can evaluate whether a design is reasonable and whether a policy decision supports real security. You also become better at spotting when someone is misusing the terms, which often signals hidden risk. Public key cryptography is also called asymmetric cryptography, and the core idea is that it uses a pair of related keys instead of a single shared key. One key is public, meaning it can be shared broadly, and the other key is private, meaning it must be protected as a secret. The public and private keys are mathematically linked so that certain operations done with one can be checked or reversed with the other, depending on the purpose. This pairing is the magic that allows trust to scale, because you can distribute the public key widely without distributing the private key. Beginners sometimes worry that sharing a public key sounds dangerous, but the safety of the system depends on the private key remaining secret and on the public key being correctly associated with the right identity. That distinction matters because most failures are not due to the math being broken, but due to identity binding, key protection, and workflow errors. One of the first practical uses is secure exchange, which is the problem of establishing a shared secret between parties who do not already share one. With symmetric encryption, both sides need the same secret key, and the question becomes how you share that key safely without someone intercepting it. Public key cryptography allows a safer approach by using asymmetric operations to agree on or protect the creation of a session key, which is then used for fast symmetric encryption of the actual data. This pattern is common because it combines the best of both worlds. Public key methods solve the safe initial exchange, and symmetric encryption handles the heavy lifting efficiently. Leaders should understand this hybrid design because it explains why public key cryptography is so central to secure communications even if it is not used for bulk data. It also helps you answer scenario questions that ask what comes first in establishing a secure channel. The first step is usually about establishing trust and a shared session secret, not about encrypting every byte with an asymmetric method. Identity is the next major reason public key cryptography matters, because systems need a reliable way to know who is on the other end. In a simple world, you might authenticate with a password, but passwords are shared secrets and they scale poorly across systems and organizations. Public key approaches support stronger identity models because the private key can act as proof of control and the public key can be used by others to verify that proof. A simple way to think about it is that the private key is like a unique stamp that only one person or system can use, and the public key is the reference that tells everyone else what that stamp should produce. However, this only works if the public key is truly associated with the right identity. Leaders need to focus on that binding, because the biggest real-world attacks often involve tricking someone into trusting the wrong public key. When identity binding is weak, public key cryptography can still be used, but it may be used to establish trust in the wrong party, which is worse than having no trust at all. This is where digital certificates come in, because they exist to bind an identity to a public key in a structured, verifiable way. A digital certificate is a statement that a particular identity is associated with a particular public key, and that statement is signed by an issuer that others trust. The issuer is typically a certificate authority, CA, which is trusted to verify identity before issuing certificates. The idea of a chain of trust matters because your system cannot personally verify every identity on the internet, so it relies on trusted issuers and trusted routes. Leaders should understand that trust is not automatic. It is delegated, and that delegation must be managed. If ACA is compromised or careless, certificates can be issued incorrectly, which undermines trust across many systems. This is why certificate validation is important, including checking expiration and whether a certificate has been revoked. Public key cryptography makes trust scalable, but the scale creates a need for governance and careful lifecycle management. Public key cryptography also enables workflows that require proof without shared secrets, and this is where digital signatures become especially important. A digital signature is created using a private key, and it can be verified by anyone who has the corresponding public key. The signature provides integrity, meaning it can reveal whether the data was changed, and it provides authenticity, meaning it can show that the signer possessed the private key at the time of signing. This is powerful because it allows one-to-many verification, where many people can verify a signature without the signer sharing a secret with each verifier. Leaders should connect this to real security workflows, such as verifying the integrity of a document, validating that a software update is legitimate, or approving actions in a system where auditability matters. The key is that verification is widely possible, while signing remains restricted, which matches many real organizational needs. When you understand this, you also see why private key protection is so critical. If the private key is stolen, the attacker can create signatures that look legitimate. Another essential concept is key exchange versus key transport, because people sometimes blend them together. In key exchange, the goal is for both sides to arrive at a shared secret without directly sending that secret in a form that an eavesdropper can use. In key transport, one side generates a key and securely sends it to the other side using public key techniques. Both approaches aim to achieve the same result, which is a shared session key for symmetric encryption, but the workflows and risks differ. Leaders do not need to implement these protocols, but they should be able to recognize what problem is being solved and what assumptions exist. If a design depends on the secrecy of a transported key, you care about how it is generated and protected during transfer. If it depends on an exchange process, you care about the integrity of the negotiation and protection against interference. This vocabulary helps you reason through scenarios where attackers attempt to intercept or downgrade security during setup. Public key cryptography also introduces a distinct set of risks and failure modes that leaders must understand, because poor handling can undermine the benefits. One major risk is private key exposure, which can happen through malware, poor storage practices, or insecure backups. When a private key is exposed, the attacker can impersonate the identity, decrypt data if the key is used for decryption purposes, or create signatures that verify as valid. Another risk is trusting an incorrect public key due to poor validation, such as accepting a certificate without verifying it properly. A third risk is weak lifecycle management, like letting certificates expire unexpectedly, failing to revoke compromised credentials, or reusing keys longer than policy allows. These risks are not theoretical. They are common operational problems that create real incidents. Leaders should frame these risks in terms of consequences and recovery, because the response often involves rotating keys, revoking certificates, updating trust stores, and communicating changes to stakeholders. Because public key operations are often slower, systems typically use them sparingly and strategically, and that design pattern matters for understanding secure workflows. In many secure protocols, asymmetric operations happen at the beginning to establish trust and negotiate session keys, and then the system shifts to symmetric encryption for efficient data transfer. This pattern supports both performance and security, but it also means that the setup phase is critical. If an attacker can interfere during setup, they may be able to redirect trust, force weaker choices, or capture secrets. Leaders should therefore care about policies and controls that protect setup integrity, such as proper certificate validation and strong identity verification processes. When teams treat the setup phase casually, they create a weakness that cannot be fixed later by strong encryption of the data. The secure workflow is only as strong as its weakest phase, and public key cryptography is often concentrated in that early phase. A helpful way to internalize public key cryptography is to connect it to the broader concept of public key infrastructure, PKI, which is the system of processes, roles, and technologies that make public key trust usable at scale. PKI includes certificate issuance, identity verification, certificate renewal, revocation processes, and trust store management. Leaders should focus on the fact that PKI is as much about governance as it is about cryptography, because it involves policies for who gets certificates, how identities are validated, and what happens when credentials are compromised. If PKI is treated as an afterthought, organizations often experience outages when certificates expire or security failures when trust is mismanaged. A mature approach treats PKI as a critical service with ownership, monitoring, and clear procedures. This becomes especially important in environments with many systems, because trust relationships multiply and small mistakes can ripple widely. Another important connection is between public key cryptography and authentication workflows for people and systems. When a user or service proves control of a private key, the system can authenticate them without them sharing a reusable secret like a password. This can reduce certain risks, such as password reuse and password guessing, but it introduces other responsibilities, like protecting private keys on endpoints and managing revocation when devices are lost. Leaders should understand that authentication is not only a technical step, it is an organizational commitment to managing identities and credentials responsibly. When a private key is tied to a person, you need onboarding and offboarding procedures that reflect that, and you need recovery procedures if the key is lost. When a private key is tied to a service, you need controls around who can deploy that service, how keys are stored, and how access is audited. Public key cryptography enables stronger authentication models, but it does not eliminate the need for disciplined identity management. A common misconception is that public key cryptography automatically prevents all impersonation, but it only works when trust in the public key is correct. If an attacker can convince a system or user to trust a fraudulent certificate or a wrong public key, the attacker can appear legitimate while the cryptography still functions perfectly. This is why leaders must insist on proper validation and on awareness of threats like man-in-the-middle attacks, where an attacker positions themselves between two parties and relays messages while presenting separate trusted identities to each side. Preventing this depends on correct certificate validation, trusted root management, and rejecting unsafe trust shortcuts. Another misconception is that using certificates means you are secure by default, but certificates can be misissued, misconfigured, or ignored by systems that fail open. The lesson is that public key cryptography provides tools for trust, but the organization must operate those tools correctly to get the benefit. When you step back, public key cryptography is best understood as a way to establish trust at scale without sharing secrets everywhere. It enables identity verification through public keys bound to identities, supports secure exchange of session keys so symmetric encryption can do fast work, and powers secure workflows like digital signatures that allow broad verification without broad secret sharing. Leaders add value by asking how identities are validated, how private keys are protected, how certificates are managed across their life cycle, and how revocation and recovery are handled. Those questions focus attention on the operational reality that determines whether the system will hold up under attack and under everyday mistakes. On the exam, this understanding helps you choose answers that emphasize trust establishment, proper validation, and key lifecycle discipline rather than answers that treat cryptography as a single checkbox. In real life, it helps you guide teams toward designs that are both secure and sustainable, which is exactly what security leadership is supposed to accomplish.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.